The death toll from the coronavirus epidemic is continuing to climb, Chinese officials said Tuesday. The government put the nationwide figure at 1,016. That was up 108 from the day before, when it was 908. The number of cases of infection also grew, to over 42,638. The figure for the day before was put at 40,171. Deaths in Hubei drove the increase. There were 103, though the number of infections reported there actually declined somewhat. One of the people evacuated from Wuhan to the United States last week is infected with the coronavirus, an American health official confirmed. The patient, one of 167 passengers on a State Department-arranged flight from China that mostly carried American citizens, has been taken to a hospital near Marine Corps Air Station Miramar in San Diego. It is the 13th confirmed case in the United States, and the 7th in California. Other government-arranged evacuation planes from China have taken passengers, more than 500 in Alta, Nebraska, Texas, and other bases in California in the last 2 weeks. Those evacuated are expected to be quarantined for 14 days, with frequent checks from medical personnel to determine whether they have developed fevers, coughs and other early signs of the virus. Hong Kong officials evacuated some residents of an apartment building after 2 people living on different floors were found to be infected with the coronavirus, the authorities said early Tuesday. Officials from the city's Center for Health Protection said the decision to partially evacuate the building was made after the discovery of a leaky bathroom pipe in the apartment of a newly confirmed patient, a 62-year-old woman. She lives 10 floors below a resident who was earlier found to be infected. Dr. Wang Kanzisheng, the health center's director, said the government was investigating the possibility of environmental transmission in the building and called the evacuation a precautionary measure. The initial report prompted comparisons to an incident in 2003 when 329 residents of a housing estate in Hong Kong became infected with SARS, or severe acute respiratory syndrome. The virus was later found to have spread through defective piping. 42 of the infected residents died. At a government-organized briefing on Tuesday, Professor Yuan Kuo-kyung, a microbiologist at the University of Hong Kong, said the situation this time appeared to be different. But he said the authorities were not ruling out the possibility of airborne transmission of the virus. 65 more infections have been confirmed on a cruise ship quarantined in Yokohama, Japan, raising the total number on board to 135, the ship's captain told passengers on Monday. At least 20 of the infected passengers are from the United States, according to a Princess Cruises spokeswoman. In all, 416 American passengers boarded the vessel, the Diamond Princess, at the start of the voyage, according to the spokeswoman. In a statement Sunday, the cruise line detailed the countries of origin of what was then 66 infected passengers. 45 were Japanese, 4 were from Australia, 3 were from the Philippines, 1 was Canadian, 1 was from England, 1 was from Ukraine, and 11 were from the United States. Updated February 10, 2020. The outbreak on the ship, which has been docked at the Yokohama port since Monday, is the largest outside China. About 3,700 people, including about 2,600 passengers and more than 1,000 crew members, are quarantined on the ship, with passengers largely confined to their cabins. The Japanese authorities have tested a few hundred people for the coronavirus who were believed to be at particular risk, but as the number of cases has risen, some passengers have pressed for everyone on board to be screened. President Xi Jinping of China, the authoritarian leader who had been noticeably absent from public view since the coronavirus outbreak escalated into a crisis, toured several public places in Beijing on Monday afternoon. The appearances seemed aimed at countering criticism that Mr. Xi has been aloof amid rising public discontent with his government's struggle to contain the crisis. The last time Mr. Xi had appeared in public was at a meeting last week with Cambodia's Prime Minister. Mr. Xi has yet to visit the epicenter of the outbreak, Wuhan, 600 miles to the south in Hubei province. Chinese press reports said Mr. Xi traveled first to a neighborhood roughly 5 miles north of his residence near the Forbidden City and toured a local government office. He later visited a city hospital, where he took part in a video conference with officials and workers at a hospital in Wuhan. Mr. Xi, wearing a powder blue surgical mask and a black suit, made no public remarks, at least according to initial reports. But state media said his visits demonstrated Mr. Xi's central role in directing the response, as well as his empathy for the ordinary people it has affected most. Workers stuck in their hometowns. Assembly lines that make General Motors cars and Apple iPhones standing silent. More than 2 weeks after China locked down a major city to stop the outbreak, one of the world's largest economies remains largely idle. Much of the country was supposed to have reopened by now, but its empty streets, quiet factories, and legions of inactive workers suggest that weeks or months could pass before this vital motor of global growth is humming again. China has been hampered by both the outbreak and its own containment efforts, a process that has cut off workers from their jobs and factories from their raw materials. The result is a slowdown that is already slashing traffic along the world's shipping lines and leading to forecasts of a sharp fall in production of everything from cars to smartphones. It's like Europe in medieval times, said Jörg Wuttke, the president of the European Chamber of Commerce in China, where each city has its checks and cross-checks. A lot of epidemics seem to come out of China, leading some to point accusing fingers. President Trump's trade czar, Peter Navarro, for one, once went so far as to describe the country as a disease incubator, and that was before the latest outbreak. But those perceptions are outdated. While some of the most serious outbreaks have been traced to Chinese origins, others associated with China may have started elsewhere. Old stereotypes have also contributed to unfounded portrayals of China as a source of contagion, when in fact it has progressed further than many countries in eradicating scourges that can flourish in developing regions. Still, China's recent history of what are known as zoonotic infections, viruses, bacteria, and parasites that spread between animals and humans have raised questions about public health practices in the world's most populous country. And while the Chinese government has strengthened disease detection and monitoring capabilities, its tendency to play down or even cover up mass outbreaks may play a role in their severity and scope. Here are 5 basic questions and answers on China and infectious diseases. A team of experts from the World Health Organization arrived in Beijing on Monday evening, nearly 2 weeks after the organization's Director General met with China's leader and praised the country's handling of the coronavirus crisis. The team was led by Bruce Aylward, a Canadian doctor and epidemiologist who has overseen international campaigns to fight Ebola and polio. The arrival of the team came the same day China said it had set a new daily record for deaths from the virus. It said 97 people had died the day before. The overall death toll is now 908 people, which surpasses the toll from the SARS epidemic of 2002-03, according to official data. The number of confirmed infections in the country rose to 40,171, and 3,062 new cases were recorded in the preceding 24 hours, most of them in Hubei province. Since WHO's Director General, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, visited Beijing in January, the organization had tried to send a team, but the Chinese government balked. The delay raised questions about China's sensitivity to accepting outside help in combating the epidemic. In a series of posts on Twitter, Dr. Tedros said countries that have seen only a few cases with no direct connection to China could yet see a jump in new infections. We may only be seeing the tip of the iceberg, he wrote. He called on all countries to share information about the coronavirus in real time with the organization. In the search for the animal source or sources of the epidemic in China, the latest candidate is the pangolin, an endangered, scaly, ant-eating mammal that is imported in huge numbers to Chinese markets for food and medicine. The market in pangolins is so large that they are said to be the most trafficked mammals on the planet. All 4 Asian species are critically endangered, and it is far from clear whether being identified as a viral host would be good or bad for pangolins. It could decrease the trade in the animals, or it could cause a backlash. It is also far from clear whether the pangolin is the animal that passed the new virus to humans. Bats are still thought to be the original host of the virus. If pangolins are involved in disease transmission, they would act as an intermediate host. In any case, the science so far is suggestive rather than conclusive, and because of the intense interest in the virus, some claims have been made public before the traditional scientific review process. Read more about it in our report in Science. The latest business casualty of the epidemic in China, esports. Gaming tournaments have come to a halt in the country in what had been expected to be a banner year for competitive video gaming. China, which is projected to have 768 million active video game players by 2022, was expected to generate $210.3 million in 2019 from industry, overtaking Western Europe as the second largest region for esports in terms of revenue. The first is the United States. Multiple esports events in China for games like League of Legends and Counter-Strike, Global Offensive have either been postponed or cancelled. Even the Pokémon video game championship that was set to take place February 2 in Hong Kong was cancelled. Public safety concerns have rippled across the globe. PUBG announced that it was cancelling an event in Berlin because a large chunk of its competitive players are in China. And the Overwatch League, a global league run by Blizzard Entertainment, a video game developer based in Irvine, California, cancelled its matches in China, where it has 4 teams. Given that many Chinese residents are stuck inside their homes, viewing esports events might have offered something of a reprieve amid the nationwide health crisis. Britain's Health Secretary on Monday declared the coronavirus an imminent threat to public health and announced a series of measures to combat its spread, even as 4 more cases were confirmed in the country. The declaration will allow the health authorities to forcibly quarantine people, and designates 1 hospital and 1 conference center as isolation facilities. So far, 8 people in England have tested positive for the virus, according to a statement on Monday from Professor Chris Whitty, the Chief Medical Officer for England. The new cases in Britain are believed to be linked to cases in France and Spain, according to the French health authorities, which all connect to a group of British citizens staying in a chalet in the alpine village of Les Contamines Montjoie. At least 5 others who stayed in the chalet and are still in France have tested positive for the virus, according to French officials. Conflicting views on whether the coronavirus can be spread through the air underscore the confusion surrounding the outbreak. Zheng Kun, the deputy head of Shanghai's Civil Affairs Bureau, said at a news conference on Saturday that the virus could be spread that way, meaning it might be transmitted more easily even if people are not in proximity than previously thought. But Shen Yinzong, the medical director of the Shanghai Public Health Clinical Center, disputed that. He told the paper, a Shanghai newspaper, that although the virus might spread through the air in theory, confirmation required further research. The Chinese government and the World Health Organization have said that most infections occurred among people in close physical contact. Experts have suggested that a related virus in 2003 that caused an outbreak of SARS could be spread through the air under some circumstances. An outbreak in Hong Kong occurred, experts said, when the wind carried the virus from an apartment complex in which several people were infected. The China Development Forum, an annual economic policy conference that China has used to project an image as an economically open country, has been postponed indefinitely. In past years, members of the Communist Party's Politburo Standing Committee and the governor of China's central bank have used the event to seek more foreign investment for the country. But this year, global companies are instead grappling with having a supply chain deeply embedded in China as the coronavirus spreads across the nation. On Monday, Nissan of Japan said it would shut down its plant in Kyushu, Japan, for 4 days beginning later this week, due to supply shortages of parts from China. Other carmakers, like Fiat Chrysler in Italy and Hyundai in South Korea, have already warned that a lack of parts from China could force them to curtail production in their home markets. Even trade shows further afield are taking a hit, with companies like Amazon and Sony choosing to stay away from this month's Mobile World Congress Technology Conference in Barcelona. The organizers said new safety measures would be put in place, including prohibiting any visitors from Hubei province in China from attending. And security officials will also take visitors' body temperatures and check passports, stamps in order to keep out anybody who visited China in the previous 14 days. The coronavirus has helped push inflation to an 8-year high, the Chinese government said on Monday, adding to Beijing's problems. Consumer price inflation rose to 5.4% year-on-year in January, compared with a 4.5% rise in December. That is the highest level since November 2011, according to China's Statistics Bureau. The outbreak has disrupted China's supply chains, making it difficult in many places to get products to market. While non-food related prices, including energy, rose slightly, food prices pushed inflation up. The price of pork, which has surged for months, has now more than doubled over the past year after an outbreak of African swine fever led to a shortage of pigs. The latest inflation figures mark a new challenge for China's central bank. The People's Bank of China has opened the spigots to provide money to local governments that are trying to contain the outbreak. The government has told banks to extend favorable terms to companies that have been closed by efforts to contain the outbreak. Chinese efforts to stop the coronavirus outbreak have hit even those companies that make essential equipment for medical and emergency workers, gear that is in short supply in many parts of the country. Officials in the city of Xiantao in Hubei province notified companies making protective clothing and medical masks that they needed to produce the proper paperwork before they could reopen. Unless they can prove their products have been cleared for sale within China, the notice said, the factories cannot not open until February 14. The notice caused an uproar online. Xiantao is a major industrial hub for what are known as non-woven products. That includes the suits and gloves used by emergency workers to protect themselves during outbreaks. The area is especially important for making protective masks. The notice said local officials made the move to ensure quality standards were upheld and to root out counterfeit gear makers. But officials relented after a public outcry. On Monday, the government said it approved 73 protective product manufacturers to resume operations, while others are being certified. Here's what early research says about how the pathogen behaves and the factors that will determine whether it can be contained. Reporting and research was contributed by Stephen Lee Myers, Russell Goldman, Keith Bradsher, Ben Dooley, Motoko Ridge, Sui Li Wei, Amber Wong, Alexandra Stevenson, Tiffany May, Megan Specchia, Constant Mayhew, Amy Tsang, Julie Bossman, Adam Satariano, Raphael Minder, Zoe Mao, Albi Zhang, Yaiwei Wang, Claire Fu, Amy Chin, Heather Murphy and Imad Khan.